When people talk about today's society, they think it happened overnight. They think that it happened in the last 5 years since social media, since the internet age, since personal computing, since the websites, since the internet. No, it's been going on for decades. And it was actually spoken about in this encyclical by Pope Paul VI. This book changed my life on the history of how we got here today, because everything revolves around contraception, whether implicitly or explicitly, whether it is obvious or not. In this book, I am about to go over 5 sections on how important this was and how revolutionary and groundbreaking this was. And people did not think he was going to come down and actually go against and condemn and say this is not church teaching, which was contraception. So we're going to go over a little bit of the history. We're going to go outside of not only the book, but we're going to go deep into what I saw through the history, because I was completely unaware of this. Obviously, they don't want you to know about it, which was the entire history all the way to the 1800s about contraception, who was involved. So let's go to a quick quote. In a world where truth feels like it's constantly shifting, how did one man, a pope, predict everything from the breakdown of the family to the rise of hookup culture? 1968. Exactly. 68. This was predicted about what was happening or going to happen right now. So the author, I hope I say her name right. I have a ton of notes down here, so do not be alarmed that I'm looking at anything but my notes. Mary Eberstadt, I'm probably saying her name, but she was someone who bridged faith, culture, public policy, essentially wrapped it up as an essayist. The book now is more relevant than ever before, because not only do we have to understand where the actual source came from, but we have to be able to change it, okay? And there's a deep history between the Catholic Church, the people who wanted to destroy the Catholic Church, and Protestantism. And a lot of the Protestants were up there as the people who wanted to become the ones who destroyed the Catholic Church and our morality and our ethics and our values. This is the problem, is that within the church, there was cultural silence that was happening for a while. You had a lot of Protestant churches folding in the early around contraception, and this was a buried encyclical, and everyone was against it when he first came out with it. But up until 1968, which is when this was issued, the encyclical, everyone globally was going through this upheaval, this sexual revolution. Who cares about the standards? Who cares about all of these guardrails to our salvation? Who cares about what the Catholic Church teaches and what they say? That's all old. That's all historical. That's a 2,000-year-old church. We need to update this. We need to come of the times. We need to be more modern. We need to embrace our flesh, our nature, our pleasures. Whatever feels good is good. We don't have a truth. We don't have a natural way of living or life. And that was essentially the doctrine being created outside of the church. And the church kept on pushing back and pushing back as much as they could. It was really hard. So what was the central teaching? The central teaching was that the Pope Paul VI, reaffirmed that marital act must remain to the transmission of life. That's it. Marital act is for the transmission of life. It is not to block life with contraception, okay? That was big, because a lot of people said, I can have the pleasure, but no consequences. That's a big break of natural law, natural life, is that I can have the pleasurable experience, the intimate experience, without the consequences. On top of that, any artificial contraception, whether that was the pills, condoms, sterilization, was unacceptable and morally wrong. And in the quote, each and every marital act must of necessity retain its intrinsic relationship to the procreation of human life. That was the flag in the ground, is that if you are doing this act, it must be within the marital sacrament. And if you're doing this act, it is for the procreation of children. That is the main reason, the natural law, that God instituted not only marriage, but the intimate relationship of a man and a woman coming together. And that is under the natural law in God's design. arguing that contraception violates natural law and that God inscribed in human bodies and relationships that need to procreate. Contraception breaks that need and breaks the ability for natural God's law and obviously natural law. Highlighting also what he said is the lack of dignity it will withhold to women. This was big, is he foresaw that women would be used as objects because there is no consequence to getting your pleasure. You're essentially lusting without the need to understanding that I have to be in a relationship under the sacrament of marriage, or I actually need to be in a relationship with her, say it's outside of marriage. I now have no consequence to my action. I can just be intimate with whoever I want, losing the dignity of the woman in which you're having that intimate act with her. He also emphasized that human beings are not the authors of moral law. We are a subject of it. So we cannot author natural law, which is contraception. We are essentially the ones who are subject to it, and we have to understand it. Moving on. Critics often portrayed it as harsh, and Pope VI showed deep pastoral concern, acknowledging that the following teaching could be difficult. Obviously it was. People hated it. They didn't like it. They were shocked that the Catholic Church, especially Pope Paul VI, they thought that Pope Paul VI would come out in favor of contraception. Instead, he wrote the Encyclical, called it, this is Pope Paul, he called it a compassionate confession, formation of conscience, and holistic marriage support, urged priests not to abandon the truth, but to accompany it with love. The structure of the document essentially begins with the observations of the modern world, begins with the reaffirmation of church teaching, and ends with the prophetic section, warnings of the consequences of widespread contraception. And that, my friends, is why we are where we are today, is because of the prophetic warnings of the consequences if this takes hold and is prevalent as it is today. And we have reached a pinnacle that is wild to what even Pope Paul would even be thinking right now. The bombshell in the cultural war was do whatever you want, free love. Just do the pleasures, just do what makes you feel good, essentially was the notion throughout the entire 60s and 70s. It was a theological bomb coming down from the Catholic Church. The only one that actually stood against contraception, the immediate fallout, open dissent erupted, not only from the secular voices, but from within the church. Over 600 theologians signed a public statement of the resistance within the U.S. alone. Bishops' conferences gave pastoral statements that were often interpreted as loopholes. You could do whatever you want. This is not really binding. It's an encyclical. The media mocked it. They called it outdated, anti-woman, oppressive. Pope Paul was painted as an authoritarian, stubborn, and repressive, a stark contrast to the so-called spirit of Vatican II, which was modern times, modern church. The loss of authority within the church. Many priests refused to preach or teach the encyclical. Very important. Because if you're not hearing it from the pulpit and you hear it from the Vatican once and it's not brought down through teaching, guess what happens? Widespread use, widespread sin, widespread adulterous relationships, which is anyone outside of the sacrament of marriage still having intimate relations. Seminaries downplayed it or ignored it. It was the first major movement of widespread public disobedience to a papal teaching. Pope Paul VI's silence, he never wrote another encyclical. Deeply wounded by the backlash, he saw that a rupture had occurred, yet he never recanted. He bore the cross of being misunderstood, even by his own. That's very powerful. Moving on to the prophecies. Essentially, what he was talking about is the history of the entire movement of contraception was first relegated to, yes, in the Lambda, I think, or something along those lines, conference. That was the first Protestants to accept it. I'm going to do a full video of the history of contraception, which goes to the 1880s, right around there. And then through that time, the pill, sterilization, condoms, anything, any way to ensure that children are not brought to life. So as Pope Paul in this encyclical talks about in paragraph 17, he listed 4 specific consequences that would result if contraception became widespread and normalized. Here we go. Number 1 is the lowering of moral standards. If you could do whatever you want without consequences in the most intimate act with someone else, where else are you going to have lower standards? The way you walk, the way you dress, the way you talk, the things you listen to, the way that you treat others, the way that you praise God or not praise God, the way that you enter church, the way that you show reverence to the church. This was a massive moment, okay, in the grand scheme of morality, because morality as it is today, as it was in the 60s, declined to such a point that there was a revival, the Jesus Revolution revival, but it all started because of this huge degradation, saying the word wrong, away from morality ethics. First, he said widespread use of contraception would lead to infidelity, lowering of morality, and casual sex, pornography, hookup apps proves that. Sexual restraint is seen as oppressive. Virginity is mocked. Modesty is erased. He also talks about sex without responsibility. Contraception detached the act from its consequences. What once required vows, sacrifice, and commitment became an empty transaction that was the real liberation from meaning. What you think is shackles, what you think is repressive, what you think is this boxed-in thing is actually there to protect you. Natural law needs to be studied because we are subject to it. We cannot we cannot supersede natural law without consequences. And number one was the actual consequences of moral standards. Number two is the loss of respect for women. This is prevalent all over the internet. Obviously, a lot of women complain about this on social media, about chivalry and things like this. It didn't happen in the 2010s, the 2000s. It didn't happen on social media. This has been going on for 150 years. A man who grows accustomed to the use of contraceptive methods may forget the reverence due to a woman. When you treat this person as someone to have the needs to an end, which is not to bring children into the world, but to fulfill pleasure, there is no reverence to that woman or now man. No women look at a man and say, actually, I want the pleasure and not the responsibility or the consequence that comes with it, and now you're using the man for your own pleasure. That's lust 101. That's pleasure. Sins of the flesh 101. Women were told the pill would empower them. Instead, it made them more usable. The rise of hookup culture, illicit material, which is an addiction right now. It is a big addiction, men and women. It is not just men anymore. There's a lot of women that are addicted to illicit material. The objectification is real. When you look at a man, and obviously someone can say, this has nothing to do with the pill. This has nothing to do with contraception. Ironically, it does. It does, because when you look at someone as an object to gain something, then that's someone being used. You're using them. It could be a man for their money or a man to take you out to dinner. You're using that man. You don't even have to take it to the nth degree of intimate relationships. As I said in number one, or I didn't say, but Pope Paul VI said, is that you break down morality. You break down morality. So the morality of using someone is now widespread. This guy is here to just, give me money, take me out. You're using women for lust. You break down the nature of the human and you just relegate them to the objectification. Instead of promoting equality, the sexual revolution enabled a masculine fantasy of consequence-free pleasure, and women paid the price. Consent replaced commitment. Consent replaced commitment. Liberation replaced love, and women were left lonelier, not freer. Number three, governmental abuse of power. Danger of this power passing in the hands of public authority. Now we have crazy laws coming down. Crazy laws. The number one thing is assisted suicide. It was of the elderly. Now they have assisted pods that you can get in and then just take your own life. When you just look at human life as something thrown away or as the intimate act, as nothing important, that it's repressive to even consider that there would be a consequence known as a beautiful human life brought into this world, and you're saying that that's not worth it, that my pleasure supersedes that, and I don't need to be married, and I can go out and just have free love with anyone and as many people as possible, and then you have all of these governmental abuses, it's going to get worse. until there's a pushback. And that's why the church is growing, because they understand that the government has been abusing their powers for centuries. Forced sterilizations, China's one-child policy, today's state-funded contraception programs for the poor, all validated this concern. Pope Paul VI foresaw how birth control could become a tool for population control, not a personal freedom. Eugenics, right there. When, you just take it to the nth degree today. I want a child that looks like this, that has this hair color, this eye color, he's this tall. Where's the end? There is no end. You're playing God, starting at not wanting to become a father or mother, again, in marriage. That's really what it comes down to. And then moving on is, we've already talked about it, is the treating the body as a machine. This is for my use. This is for my pleasure. This is not for the most important thing that God willed into this world, which is children, to replace the next generation. You're also not even caring about the next generation. You're only caring about your own pleasure right now in the moment. Who cares that someone else is doing this? Who cares about what someone's doing behind closed doors? Well, it's because we're all affected. We are all children of God. And when someone is used as a machine, they bring those sins into the real life. Or real life, through the way that they dress, the way that they act, the social media they put out, just the awful reality TV that is put out. And then finally, it is when you sever sex from procreation, you never sever human dignity from its origin. And the last is, obviously, we're talking about the hookup culture, the revolution. By the way, I don't know how many other revolutions are actually good. It was sold as progress, a new freedom from traditional morality, that it would liberate everyone. It has been a real fallout, a decline in marriage, a rise in fatherlessness. 40% of children are born outside of wedlock. Marriage rates have plummeted. The amount of children being born is plummeted. The amount of people having casual sex is skyrocketing. Sex without marriage is skyrocketing. Children without commitment, skyrocketing. Widespread freedom when people are more isolated than ever. The rise of single living, hookup culture, ghosting has eroded real intimacy. How much further can we go? Hookup culture is not something that just, and this is, here we go. I'm going to just blow your mind. When you have people that say you could do whatever you want, this is the problem. If a guy gets what he wants by doing absolutely nothing, then he has no standard to get what he wants. So if I just scream out on the side of a street, and I get what I want, I'm going to continuously go to the side of the street and scream out, I need food. And I'm not talking about homelessness. I'm just talking about, say, a baby or someone who goes to a bar like a guy and says, okay, it's easy to hook up with someone. Why would I even try? Why would I even commit? Why would I even get married if I'm getting what I want? So yes, what your neighbor does affects you. Because now that guy literally is not trying to get what he wants, okay? He's putting in no effort. He's getting no commitment. He's not getting on his knee and marrying this woman. He's literally buying 2 to 3 drinks and having an intimate night with this woman. That's how it affects you. Everyone is affected by everyone else's actions. I don't need to say the butterfly effect, because I don't know if that's Christ-like, but everything, especially young women, young men, are not liberated by having casual sex. The pill made women and men available at no cost, at no commitment, at no sacrifice to the betterment not only of themselves or society or their soul or their salvation. It's bringing people. It's also the culture in large. You just see all over the internet. It is everywhere, the amount of graphic material that was relegated to magazines or even just over 21 50 years ago. And now it's disgusting. It is all over. The commodification, the P word has become normalized. Relationship is about self-gratification. The confusion of getting married, not getting married, gender roles, confusing, natural law. We still have natural law. We still have it on our heart. We still have it on our heart. Still, women want to be courted. Men still want to court. It's still on our heart because that's natural law. We're subject to it. But when we try to actually supersede it, when we try and change it, and we want to try and become God, that's impossible. And that only leads to destruction, dependency onto depressive pills, and obviously isolation, as we're talking about. So really the conclusion of this, I obviously brought in a lot of stuff. I could be totally wrong on some of it. Leave the comments below on where I was wrong, where I was right, because the Encyclical made me go down a rabbit hole to then bring up a bigger and bigger issue that I'm actually going to the history of the pill and how it changed the church and the entire revolution, in quotes, 50, 60, 70 years from when it first came onto the scene in every Protestant church since the Lambda Conference in, I think, the 1923 or 1913, 1933, early 1900s. Literally, they said it's fine, and then every single church right after that said it was fine. Only the Catholic Church has said no, and only through this encyclical was it made known. And he did not produce another one because of the backlash, but he never backed down. Pope Paul VI, pray for us in this broken and fallen world. I hope you liked this video. We have a bunch of other book reviews that we're going to be doing. If you have any questions, leave in the comments. If you have any suggestions, there is something in the box below in the caption where you can leave what you want me to talk about, what topics you want me to cover. Have a great day. Subscribe to the video. And of course, as always, stay blessed, say the rosary, go to confession, believe in the Eucharist, and of course, as always, pray for one another.